I'm Victor Nizet. I'm from UC San Diego. I've been on the medical advisory board, I think, longer than any other medical advisory board member since 2008. I've also worked the research mentor for 7 Giannini Fellows over the years, including one of the new ones you guys might get to meet, whose name is Elizabeth. And I'm a Twitter user who had just a personal Twitter account where I mainly followed humorists and people commenting on current political events for maybe the first 5 years or so that I had the account, and then started to see many, many more scientists, including members of my lab, using it, and then started to use it more professionally as and get involved in science Twitter. So if you look at my timeline or feed, it's pretty much a 50-50 mix between science and non-science at this time. And you'll hear, I think, the fresher perspective from Sergey, because I'm a little bit of a dinosaur here. You have a profile picture, and you can make some sort of banner and swap those out as often as you want. And then you put together a little bit of a bio, which now, talks about the kind of science I do, and also links to a program that I've developed at UCSD that has a separate Twitter account run by the program manager and outlinks to my lab. So I found, from Dr. Paige Giroux, who has a very popular science Twitter account, some reasons to use the social media. One is that you may hope to advance your scientific career and have a greater impact on your field. Some people want to have and develop a fun career community beyond their own geography. They want to use it as a training ground to become a better science communicator. By modeling science and your enthusiasm for science, you might be a role model for future people, sharing what it's like to be a scientist in your field. And then ultimately, you could help non-scientists make better decisions about their lives based on science, especially many of us who work in the medical field. So since some aren't on Twitter, I bet these are in the common lexicon, but you have a timeline, you get to choose who you feed and follow, and really it's those accounts that appear in your timeline, and you can have them appear chronologically, or you can let Twitter's Oliver artificial intelligence help pick some things they think you'd like to emphasize those at the top of your timeline. You can obviously retweet something that you endorse or are interested in, and you have the option of quote tweeting, meaning putting a little bit of a personal spin comment along with the tweet you're doing. But I think it's very important not to be a media thief. Don't steal other people's contents and just rebrand them as your own. And I think try to be positive quote tweeting in a community. You can simply just like a tweet or make a comment in the comment section if you really have more of a question or just want to indicate your endorsement, so that the attention goes to that. You can notify, you will get notifications if anyone ever mentions you in a tweet or replies, retweets, or likes your. You can direct message people on the side, just like other apps. If you use the person's Twitter, it will appear in their notifications, so might help other people read their tweets. You can use hashtags. These are ways of helping people search keywords. You might see these with breaking events or types of science or communities like postdocs or CRISPR. People try to live tweet events as they're occurring. So then you're providing tweets in real time. I'll give an example of how I did that at a conference. And a thread is a series of tweets because you have, I think, like 288 characters or something max, or 144 characters, and you want to make it longer, you might make a thread, like if you have a new paper. So I've used, the tweet now in different ways. We celebrate milestones in the laboratory, like a thesis defense or a graduation. I try to retweet and support our friends. Here's the former Giannini Fellow, Chris LaRock, who has his own lab now at Emory, and he had a paper in Nature last week. So just mentioning that paper, but having people, look at the thread to get the detailed information. I think it's good and maybe politically wise to boost your own university in your tweets. We want to recruit the best faculty and the best students to your university. So when things happen, like UCSD got highly ranked in a particular area, or we acquired the Venter Institute, or we made a biodegradable shoe, or a faculty member got an honor, or a student got an honor, I like to share those informations and tag the university and the graduate program. I think it's really useful for advertising job opportunities. Here, a friend of mine, not on Twitter, I tweeted his postdoc opportunity, and he said it reached a very high audience. I encourage people to retweet it. So this then gets spread out and maybe reaches thousands of people ultimately who could be interested in a new postdoc and learning more. You can, share the personality of your lab if you want to say that it's, kind of a fun place that you might want to join in the research. And you can use threads like we had a paper come out last year, and the day it came out, what I did is, since I had the paper in my ongoing talks, these 16:9 slides that you are using, you can conveniently convert them into images in the talk and basically just walk the people through the paper. And I think this brings a lot of attention to a breaking paper that people might not catch. Not everybody is reading the journals that land in their inbox or the table of contents abbreviations. And of course, you can get double your money by posting the bioRxiv preprint that you're excited about. And then once again, when it finally ends up in publication. I'm a big fan of medical history, so I often post things like this, like at the beginning of the pandemic, when people were talking about the vaccine challenges. I reminded them a little bit of the history of vaccination in America, and that really the first concept of a vaccine was based on the knowledge of an African slave that was brought to America and shared his traditional medicine practices they had for scarification against smallpox, and how that really curtailed an outbreak in Boston. Use it to advertise events like seminar series. We're hosting at UCSD to drum up the attendance, especially if there is a online option, and of course encourage people to retweet that to reach a broader audience. And I was the organizer of a Gordon Research Conference. It occurred in May in 2018, and I sat near the front of the conference, and I basically live blogged the whole thing. And it was a lot of fun to bring attention to all the different young scientists, as well as the established keynote speakers. I just kind of looked online, clipped a little picture from their research, took a picture of them talking, and created this kind of sense of what was going on at the conference, hopefully boosting it for future iterations. You can develop programs at UCSD, like we developed a program now funded by the NIH to increase diversity in the academic workforce in the field of infectious diseases. So these are scholars that are coming from all over America, junior faculty or rising postdocs, and participating in a 2-week boot camp at UCSD, and then have longitudinal mentoring. And I use this to advertise the program, and this helped us get a lot of great participants. You know, when my own postdocs have gone on to their own labs, I try to advertise that, and you know, put out their Twitter handles and increase the community. I think that's a big plus. Never hurts to celebrate others. There's so much goodwill to go around. I tend to be like interested in you know, memes and other scientific lightheartedness, and so if some image strikes me as having a second interpretation that could be in science, or there's a meme going around that I could convert to my field, sometimes I do those, and that's just a fun aspect of using Twitter. And you never know. I often, you know, when I see breaking stories that I think are really interesting, like I saw this story on bioRxiv of this bacteria that was 5,000 times the size of, you know, prior bacteria. And I just posted a link to the bioRxiv article. And because I posted this link, an editor at Science Magazine called me, and I said, well, I'm not really an expert in giant bacteria. He said, no, I want your ideas about why this was really cool. And they ended up writing an article, and then they quoted me in that article. And some people are poipi, as I've written there, show a little bit of their lives beyond the lab, kind of use Twitter like you might use Facebook. And I do that, you know, pretty sparingly, but it's something you could consider, you know, when we have a dog sitting business that my wife and son run. If we get a cute one, or just something that happens to me out and about, or I like sports, or I saw a poignant moment with my parents watching the news about the invasion of Ukraine, because they both had lived during Nazi occupation in different European countries. And my son and I were in the COVID vaccine trials. So you can share those kind of things. And, you know, anytime you start out, you're going to be, you know, probably interacting with scientists and friends in your peer group. But it's kind of interesting. There was this analysis published in Science that when you get to about 1,000 followers, then the majority of your followers are no longer scientists in your area, but a large chunk of them are actually the general public. So that just means it's important that your tweets are understandable to a broad audience. And that comes with a little bit of responsibility too. You don't want to be flippant about stuff, and you need to think about what you tweet. And a couple times people have, you know, taken a tweet of mine maybe the wrong way, or they didn't know that, you know, sometimes I do things tongue in cheek, and I've personally apologized to them in a direct message, or taken it down, worried that other people might misinterpret it that way. But eventually your Twitter feed can end up even in a Google search of your name. So you can see that could end up having some, benefits, or I guess it's a way of cross-fertilizing different communication platforms for your research. And finally, I'll just mention that you can go into a tool called Twitter Analytics, and you can kind of see, what was your most popular tweet in the past month, who mentioned you, did you get any new followers that are themselves have big Twitter audiences, what tweet got some interest in the media, how many new followers you have, how many people visited your profile. But you can see, that's, eventually, if you stick with it and are interested in expanding your profile as a means of sharing your research, you can get quite a few people checking you out. And it's interesting that when I go to conferences, sometimes people know you because they've read a science paper, or they met one of your collaborators or trainees. But sometimes, honestly, there's a few people who know me because they've seen my tweets or my memes or something, and it lowers a barrier for them to contact you. And I won't really go into detail, but there was an interesting blog. Mass General Hospital ran a little a podcast on how people are using Twitter and how scientists get the most out of Twitter, and had a number of successful practitioners there. And they had some really good insights about being authentic, being yourself, be professional, and you just do as much as you feel comfortable. It can be one tweet a month, it can be a few tweets a day, and not to feel bad if you post something and it doesn't get a lot of engagement, that it shouldn't be a job or an extra thing you have to do. You do it because you want to do it. It can be empowering for you personally because it allows you to punch home some messages and things that you're really passionate about that are not necessarily what a peer reviewer of a manuscript would let you punch home in terms of your belief and excitement about something. You're supposed to be very measured in your scientific populations. And this guy who wrote an interesting book called Twitter for Scientists says he just shares what he's doing. He thinks out loud. It helps to humanize scientists, which is great for other scientists and great for the public as well. And if you're curious about other areas of science, and I've realized there's some things that I was passionate about that had fallen by the wayside, like ecology and human evolution, that I tend to follow now, that I really wouldn't have that much access to otherwise.
Okay, so just by introduction, I was a Giannini Fellow from 2018 through 2021, and at the time I was a postdoc at Stanford, working on brain-computer interfaces to restore lost speech, which is what I'm continuing to work on, not so surprisingly, as a new PI at UC Davis. So I just started my lab in October, so it's been about 9 months now. And I went through my recent kind of tweets and retweets to prepare for this talk, which was a little interesting lesson to see how do I actually use Twitter. And it's going to be similar in many ways to Victor's. So I think while a little bit redundant, this is giving you like two independent samples of, I think, a similar way to use it. So it says I joined in 2010, but I basically didn't use my account for like 10 years. Like one of my hipster friends was like, check out this fun new app. And then I installed it and I never used it. But then maybe like a year into my postdoc, we had a new lab member, another postdoc named Jonathan Michaels, who convinced me that it's worth it. He's like, look, it's going to feel like a waste of time. Give it 6 months, see. And I was like, all right, this seems like useful advice. So I'm going to go ahead and try that. So, okay, I think I have like 15 things I use it for. One of the main ones, which was already mentioned, discovering papers, tools, grants opportunities. So like, here's an example of a code pack that a person in my subfield put out. Here's an example of a preprint that's relevant to me. Here's a grad student kind of with a blog about a conference that I couldn't attend, but I got to hear the recap and highlights. This is a NIH program officer who I follow in my subfield who is posting about new grant opportunities. This is another junior PI who is advertising a early career award, which I encourage our new postdoc to apply for. And here's like another Python code pack that I thought was useful. This has been really cool. So I will like admit, I don't read journal table of contents anymore. I barely check my Google Scholar notifications. Honestly, like, because I follow about 1,000 people in my field and it's fairly prolific, pretty much anything that I think I should read, someone's going to tweet and I'm going to see it. So I find that really useful. I mean, it's like a great group effort, curation tool. And I find that quite useful. So more on the self-promotion side, much like Victor's saying, right, sharing my own papers. So here you can notice that I'm quote tweeting my old tweet, which was about the preprint. And now I'm saying it's published and there's a link to the open data set. Here's another example. So you may notice there was a preprint where really I was quote tweeting my co-first author who had a thread about the paper. So again, these are these threads or tweet prints, which are, I think of them like kind of like an extended abstract with a few figures. Don't just copy and paste figures from your paper. Ideally, like simplify them, maybe make them a little more splashy and interesting. These are useful. There are a lot of things that if they're not totally in my domain and critical for my work, if I read someone's tweet print, which is maybe like 20 tweets long, I feel like I have a pretty good sense of that paper. I'll see some reactions, which is sort of a light version of seeing if there's like any major issues. And of course, we should actually read papers in detail, but you only have so much time. So I find this actually a quite efficient way to consume content that's sort of peripheral to my subfield, but still useful. Definitely echoing, lift other people up. So sharing my colleagues' papers and preprints. Lots of my tweets are like, congrats so-and-so, or in this case, talking about how excited I was that I was able to kind of comment on a book about a book being written for musicians and tie it to recent research that I'm familiar with. This is kind of fun. Similarly, like when there's press about colleagues' work, I retweet that. Sharing news related to my research in the popular press. So there was a New York Times article recently about one of the clinical trial participants that I worked with for basically my whole postdoc. And also it went into a larger discussion of brain-computer interfaces. So I retweeted that. Also, like, we make mistakes. So in this case, I tweeted the wrong link. I forgot the last part of the hyperlinks, and then I had to follow up. That's okay. That happens. Like, no one cares. It's not a big deal. Don't be like embarrassed or stressed about it. There was like another article, more self-promotion. So sharing upcoming talks, just like Victor was saying, especially if it's on Zoom. If I'm giving a talk and they announce it, I will retweet that, or I will announce, like in this case, I was at a panel at South by Southwest, so I let that know, and presumably it increased attendance. People also tweet after a talk, often with a photo. It's basically just bragging, let's be honest. But I think it's fun. It's also often a nice way to thank your host because it kind of gives them more exposure, right? So if you were invited to a seminar, you can, later thank them and talk, say something nice. I think generally, like, being positive and nice, at least that's my like Twitter persona, hopefully actual persona. Some people are a little more adversarial. There's some like kind of gadfly types. I've made the decision to just be almost exclusively positive with very, very few exceptions. And I think as a junior career person, that's probably wise. But, people can make their own decisions. So again, supporting colleagues. I've seen a lot of these recently. So like a bunch of, people who are postdocs around my time are now starting their own labs. And every time they do, it's like, a lot of mutual endorsement and talking about what a great mentor they're going to be. And to be clear, I only do this if I actually know this person and think they are great. But I think this is a nice way to help people. I think, what comes around goes around. If you're supporting others, they will support you. They'll, retweet your announcements, looking for people, for example. Similarly, retweeting opportunities. So like the Simons Foundation, which does computational neuroscience, has a undergraduate research fellowship. So I was kind of, sharing that, which is a useful service to the field. One of my professional societies has like an online seminar, so I help advertise that. Hopefully people find that useful. Similarly, sharing resources. So there's an online summer course, which I think is awesome. So I just kind of did a big endorsement of that. One of my colleagues was running a hackathon in our field, so I was advertising that. And then stuff about the lab. So lab milestones here, I was kind of sharing the good news that we have our first postdoc who is also on Twitter. So I was able to tag her using the @ And then I kind of expanded upon that just to mention that the lab has grown a lot. There's like a screenshot of the people page of our lab website. And, it's self-promotion, it's science communication. I think I've had a lot of colleagues or people even from outside my institution, like when I've met up with them, they're like, oh, it sounds like things are going really well. And so to me, that is feedback that in terms of like creating a perception of momentum, I am succeeding. And I think that is helpful, right? People are more likely to want to join a lab that is seen as successful. People are more likely to tell their students. So for example, we have a second postdoc coming in the summer where his PI was aware of kind of my lab's work and that it's growing, we're doing cool stuff. And this PhD student was advised to take a look at it, and he ended up committing to join us this summer. So I think self-promotion does work well, and don't be shy to do it. It's kind of part of your professional job is to help your lab succeed. So here's another one, right? Like we joined a clinical trial, so we had an announcement about it. We had our first data. So this is some SEEG from a person with epilepsy. So I shared that, right? Things like that. Other announcing successes, very much in the same vein and motivation. A bunch of my IP from my PhD and postdoc was licensed, which was pretty cool because it shows that the work is actually making its way closer to like widespread clinical deployment and helping patients. So that was great. I made an announcement when we got our first grant. Again, kind of conveying that we're going places, and this is a lab you want to be a part of. Other kind of personal prizes, things like that. And then of course, recruiting, I put a star here. I think to me, this has been the most useful or value added of being on Twitter is I think I've done quite well as a new PI in getting people. We have like 3 master's students, an incoming PhD student, 2 postdocs, software engineer, a couple like undergrads and med students. And I think Twitter has been helpful for that. So in this example, I was just announcing that my the relevant graduate groups at my institution, what their deadline is, sort of hyping up the wide range, in my case, neuroscience going on at UC Davis. This is more specific. We were looking for a software engineer, which are hard to hire these days because they can make a lot more money in the private sector. And it was a little bit more of a descriptive. I posted the link to the official university description, but then I had like as a screenshot, a text and graphic of really what the position's about. I don't know, probably this is not totally on board with what HR would prefer, but whatever. For those who have seen job descriptions, especially at public institutions like UC's, but even Stanford, where I was before, has this problem. They're very formulaic, and a lot of official job ads don't tell you really much about what that job is. And so I think having a microphone and a venue to advertise it in your own words, both through Twitter and through your lab website or personal website, is, I think, a very, very useful technique. Again, similar to something Victor said, advertising your institution is good. It helps you, it helps your colleagues. So this was during graduate interviews for biomedical engineering. I was doing the Zoom, it was all on Zoom, but I was strategically by my pool and it was sunny out. And, it's February and people are on the East Coast, and hey, why not flaunt what we can offer, which is fantastic weather. I guess we're all in California, so we can all agree with that. And similarly, like my department right now is hiring. So again, I was advertising that I think this is a great place to work. It's growing rapidly, et cetera. Career transition announcements. So like when I could announce my faculty job, I of course did so. That I think was helpful to set in motion getting word out there, which would help us recruit people. Sort of more like mushy things like, okay, when was my last day, walking out of my old lab, a nice goodbye, but it was got a lot of responses and let people know that I was leaving. And a bunch of people actually reached out and were like, oh, we should get coffee, blah, blah, blah. I have occasional like nuggets of what I call wisdom for other, like kind of like helpful tips. So I don't know, I found that in Google Scholar, you can add co-author stars. They don't happen automatically, but you can just edit them yourself. I think this is important. So that's something I shared. I couldn't find other examples, but I've definitely done things, like little, I don't know, tricks in Adobe Illustrator or tricks in exporting figures. Like there's like things that kind of help people that you find useful. And if you keep doing that, that helps build followers and makes your account something that people want to follow. Similarly, also to Victor, very occasional kind of like personal, like more like Facebook or Instagram style. Like, I don't know, I was excited about my tomatoes and kind of shared that. And also the plums all over the streets are edible and delicious. This is curated. It is kind of, I think, like Instagram and other things, right? I mean, it is to make myself seem approachable. It's to kind of advertise the location. I think a little bit of this, it shows that PIs or scientists in general are humans, which is good for communication. It makes me seem more approachable to potential students. Some people do a lot more of that, and I think that's great too. Certainly, it is more fun to follow people who share like lots about what's going on in their life. I've just been a little bit careful. I run a clinical trial. I'm recruiting participants. I'm in a neurosurgery department, which is fairly conservative. So I'm trying not to be like too out there with kind of the personal stuff, and I'll probably dial that up over time. And then like I said, I try to be very positive. So very rarely do I kind of critique stuff, and I try to be polite. So I don't know, this guy, like he had this long Twitter thread about how he ignores any paper that mentions the word decoding, which is like a big thing that one does in neuroscience. And so a few other people kind of pushed back, and then he pushed back on them. So then he was basically saying like brain-machine interfaces, you can just decode muscle activity from your butt muscles instead of from the brain. Why bother? So I kind of like tongue-in-cheek pushed back on that a little bit, but actually it didn't lead to like a vicious fight. You can see the thread continuing kind of left to right. When I was like, hey, look, I think we're talking about different types of papers. And he said, oh, can you give me some examples? And I shared links to papers, and he said, thank you. So it didn't turn into a huge escalation. I think, hopefully this other researcher at Duke learned something. I probably learned something. I didn't find the tweets because probably they were deleted by whoever was quote tweeting, but there's another example. So there's a startup in Neuralink in my subfield, which was accused by PETA of animal abuse. Also, they did some of the early work at UC Davis, so kind of was close to home. And I kind of ignored that for like the first 24 hours when this little storm was brewing. But then I saw other neuroengineers, so people in my field, kind of piling on and saying, oh, there's all this horrible stuff happening. And I pushed back on that, saying that, hey, look, I actually know a lot of the people that work there. I know that they take animal welfare really seriously. And actually, in fact, a month ago, the lawsuit was thrown out by a judge as baseless. So like that was an example where I did sort of delve into something somewhat controversial, because I think animal research is really important and often under attack. And people are kind of assuming bad things about like literally my former lab mates who now work there. And so I even had a private direct message correspondence with a professor in the UK who I'd never met before, but he was one of the in-field people piling on. And I kind of said, hey, do you really think so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so are like abusing monkeys? And he's like, you're right. I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the people working there. I just thought about the CEO or whatever owner. And he actually ended up like posting an apology and said, let's wait for the facts to come out. So like an opinion was changed on the internet, for the first time in human history. But I think if you're polite and respectful, you can actually change opinions, at least on the margins. So just to summarize, I'm kind of breaking this down into 3 areas. One is gathering information. The biggest one is self-promotion, but it is what it is. Helping others, I think, helps offset the self-promotion. If you only self-promote, I think it's a little bit obnoxious. And then this sort of area of debate and activism, which many people do much more of, and sort of I intend to dial that up as they become kind of more influential and more senior. But I would encourage people to do more of it even from the beginning. Just there are some kind of unknown risks, and you may not know who you'll upset, and you'll never find out. So just everything has potential pros and cons, but voicing your voice in support of worthwhile causes, will probably impress more people than it will upset. And the people who you upset, maybe you didn't need them in your corner anyway, because they weren't going to help you.